Nomad Podcast.
Thank you, Pascal, for joining me today. I normally start the podcast with people sharing their rabbit hole story. So, would you like to introduce yourself first of all, and how did you get into Bitcoin?
Yes,
I assume you're not Dutch, you're Swiss. So
no, I'm Swiss. I'm originally Swiss. Yeah. It's great to be here, Janis. So my name is Pascal, as you said, and I am 35 years old by now. Quite an oldie, I would say. But discovered Bitcoin maybe 9 years ago, and this was actually in the US. So I was, during university, I studied political sciences as well as economics and some law as well. And I was always interested in monetary economics, but something which was not taught at university, there was only the Keynesians and everything. So I studied this as well. I found it interesting, but I thought there has to be more. And then I started writing for an institution called Liberales Institut. And they were sort of on the liberal side, but not like the leftish liberal side, but the normal libertarian side. And there I was introduced to Friedrich August von Hayek and these people, and that got me really curious to learn more. And so I really went down the rabbit hole, the Austrian economics rabbit hole, so to say. So with me, it was really before I started to learn about Bitcoin, I was already in Austrian economics. Mm-hmm. With many people, it's the other way around. And for me, it was really like Austrian economics first. I ended up being for a summer school in the US for 1.5 weeks in Auburn, Alabama, where the Mises Institute is. It's another of these institutions, and they had like this summer school, and there Bitcoin was highly evangelized, and we heard about it. There was this very early entrepreneur from the US, Patrick Byrne was his name.
Okay.
He was the owner of Ownerstock. It's like IKEA in the US, and they already accepted Bitcoin way in 2013, 14 or something. And so that's where I really learned about Bitcoin. I went on to study it. I went to Vienna with Raim Dagisadegan, at the Scholarium. There I got deeper into the topic, and then started also a job as a journalist in Switzerland, where I was writing about Bitcoin and the digital asset space. And ever since, I got deeper into the topic. And as I said, for the last 9 years, I've been full-time in Bitcoin, sort of a self-made guy. Yeah.
Okay, cool. So basically, it's not the usual Bitcoin story then, because I know a lot of people would say I bought my first Bitcoin, but then sold them for some pizzas or some stuff, or I even have a few guys which actually told me they lost like the seed phrase, which is painful, but it's not the usual Bitcoin story.
No, it's not an exciting story, but it's also just like I'm a rather theoretical guy, I really like study theory and then I like philosophy and everything, and I do a lot of thinking, and history is also something that is dear to my heart. So I do a lot of this, and obviously I was always sort of ridiculed by my family members and relatives and colleagues, like this is not relevant at all, and so, but this just kind of intrigues me, and I find it so interesting. And so that also helped me to really understand the foundation of everything. And so when I discovered Bitcoin, which was not that early, but when I discovered it, I was like fully sold immediately. Like, okay, this makes sense because I've understood money and what it is through the Austrian lens, and then it also dawned on me that Bitcoin must be quite interesting. And so I was a student back then. I started buying some Bitcoin, but obviously if I really were that well off, I wouldn't be sitting here. I would be in the Bahamas drinking some cocktails and stuff, but obviously, that's sort of my story, but it's not the usual way.
It's not the usual, but in a sense, it then also showed you how finance basically works. Because when I got into Bitcoin, it showed me how the works. I mean, look at the situations currently in the Middle East, for example, or look at generally Europe with its finance problems, especially with the EZB just giving out loans and money to everyone, which then some people can't pay back, right? Or some nations can't pay back. But how did you then get into finance, like really hardcore finance? I heard, is that true? You're into in the banking industry?
Yes, now I also sort of work in the. I have like these backward stories all the time. So I got to meet Bitcoin in a weird way. I also now I was fully self-employed. I was a digital nomad traveling the world, and I made it back into the traditional world. You know, usually it's the other way around again. Like people start out in the world of finance, work for a bank, but then they're fed up and they go elsewhere. And for me, it's the other way around. I started working for a traditional bank in Switzerland around a year ago. I don't do this full time. I have some projects on the side myself, but there I got back into finance. And it's probably just because even though I would consider myself a Bitcoiner, having studied it, I'm not one of these really hardcore guys who's only doing Bitcoin, who's only interested in Bitcoin. I do a lot of sports, I do a lot of things on the side, you know. So for me, it's more of a tool and something that I studied, and so yeah, that's probably why I am in finance. But as I said, because I'm so interested in these theoretical connections of how the world works, exactly. I've studied finance, I've studied the monetary system. The more I studied, I'm with you on that like the world is sort of very in the gutters, so to say. You know, not everything is going well. But something I also learned is that it's very complex, you know, really Byzantine. Like the more you learn, the more it's like, okay, maybe this is a little more nuanced than Bitcoiners sometimes say, than the other way around. It's a little more nuanced that the politicians say, but overall it's very interesting.
It's also not easy to be, let's say, personally, I always thought about it, maybe getting into politics, but now that I see like who really controls you in politics, doesn't matter if you're left or right, at the end of the day you're controlled by either the same person or like a person which doesn't like the other group, and then there you go. That's like a conflict of interest, you know.
Yeah.
And for me, it's interesting because when I look into Bitcoin, where do you have that? Like you have no really conflict in a sense. You have maybe some companies which want to have more Bitcoin than the other, like we have with MicroStrategy or Strategy now, and you know, but. It's really interesting when you talk to Bitcoiners. They are all on the same page. I just had a nice conversation with some elderly guys, with people who were like at least 20 years older than me, and we just talked. I mean, I'm 20. They were like 40 or 50, you know. So you don't have that in the fiat world in a sense, but yeah. Now to the fun part of this interview. You wrote a book together with your friend.
Yes.
And some Mexican dude, I heard. Some Pablo Escobar dude. No. Some
no,
drug cartel dude. No.
It's not Pablo. It's another famous Mexican dude, but it's probably more professional. Well, yeah, it's a book we co-authored with Ricardo Salinas. He's a Mexican billionaire and visionary entrepreneur. And yeah, there's some clapping going on here. That's it. That's the fate of filming outside. But at least we get to enjoy the sun, you know.
Yeah.
No, but yeah, that's exactly what we did. We wrote this book with him together. He's really into Bitcoin, even though he's like CEO of 24 companies, still like very involved. And when I did an interview with him back in 2020 something, 2023 I think, or 2022, it was really interesting to have to see how he understood Bitcoin. Even though he's such a busy entrepreneur, he has a great theoretical foundation again, and that's what sort of intrigued me, you know, because as I said, I really like if people have gone deep with a topic and really do understand stuff, and so that's how it came about in the end, you know, having really talked to him, and then we asked, would you like to co-author this book with us? He was really a big fan of Saifedean's book, the Bitcoin Standard, Fiat Standard, so he told us it would be nice if the book was sort of close to these books, and that's what we then did. In the end, it was obviously us who mostly did the writing, and we just had some influence from him doing the interviews.
Probably,
yes, exactly. And so, yeah, it's been great. I mean, he's quite famous, maybe not in Europe, but in Mexico, Latin America, and even the US, some people know him. And in Bitcoin, he's also a rather famous person, yeah.
So is the book then mainly about just Bitcoin, or are there also other finances?
Yeah.
topics?
No, it's actually split up into 7 chapters, and only 2 of the chapters are about Bitcoin. So in that way, it's again quite similar to Seyfedin's book, The Bitcoin Standard, where he first only talks about the history of money and stuff. And we have the same. We have like a chapter on the history of money, where we also end up discussing like these polar opposites being MMT and Bitcoin, you know, like which we consider like polar opposites. And we sort of had this historical lens on how this all developed, where it started way back in the Roman Empire, I guess, and we ended up with the system which is fiat, and we think the end game will be something like a fully fledged MMT system, you know. And that's what we describe. We also have a chapter on like how young people are sort of screwed by the system increasingly, you know.
Especially my generation.
Yes, even though like we do sympathize with the fact that I have a lot of discussion with my dad as well, who is a boomer, and he's always telling me, he's always telling me, well, you're so good off, you know, or so well off. Look at what you can do. You can just travel to all these conferences. And I'm sort of agreeing with him. In some sense, we live in the best world possible. But then again, when it comes to other stuff, especially like saving money to buy a house or something, this has come quite unattainable, you know.
I guess his generation had it much more easier with buying a house and having
in that
a
respect,
family.
Yes, in that respect, it was a lot easier. And so that's what we sort of tackle in the book, and we try to bring some nuance. You know, we don't just say, okay, everything has been worse or everything is worse now, and so we try to differentiate and really show that the main problem is really that the money itself is not something that you can really save in for the long term. This is something that is widely understood by the Bitcoin community, but we really flesh this out and then show how Bitcoin is the solution, and we tie it to the Christian Reformation, and we say, or we make the sort of comparison that Satoshi is the modern Martin Luther, and who sort of decentralizes money from the state, as he did like religion with the state and stuff. And so I think it's an interesting read. I enjoyed researching it. I learned a lot myself, and so it's always nice to write books, because then you get more familiar with the topic yourself, and you can explain it better.
And maybe also the people who will read it then maybe understand more of it, and maybe you also get close to the people who.
Yes, that's hopefully the goal.
And then maybe they approach you, hey, you're Pascal, you wrote that book, right? And then I wrote it. And then they'll probably ask you, hey, can you tell me more about this and this? And what did you mean by that? And that's always nice, you know. So my question now to you is: Are there any more books coming, or did you think of this book as like your last book in a sense? Or?
No, it's definitely not the last book. I mean, I'm doing so much reading and just taking up information. So at some point I want to write another book, but there's nothing obviously in planning, because this one was just published. I sort of have the tendency, and this is what my wife usually tells me, is like, when I have done something, I'm like, okay, I can check it off, and now on to the next thing. And she was like, no, now you sort of have to also market your book. You know, it's cool. It's been 3 years that you built something with your colleagues and with Ricardo, and now try to really make this worth your while. And so this is what I'm focused on now. This is also why I'm here with my colleague at the conference. We're doing some signings and stuff. And so, this is why I'm not focused on reading or writing another book just now. But there's already tons of manuscripts that I have from the past, and it's definitely not my magnus opum, as some people sometimes say. I think this will come later, once I'm maybe 60 or 70 years old, and then I see if the books are still around. But then if they are, I would probably publish then another book.
So in a sense, I mean, now I have an idea actually for maybe your next book that you want to work on. You could write like a Bitcoin diary in a sense, where you maybe show like each year how Bitcoin evolved. Who knows? You know, that would be cool.
Yes, I did.
From the theoretical analysis and the maths behind it.
I did something for I was like sort of a essay competition once. It wasn't an entire book, but it was like 25 pages. And I did something like this exactly, where it's from the viewpoint of somebody who's writing a diary, but then is also looking into the future, like to 2020 or 2035 or something, you know. And then it's always like he's now, it's obviously in the future, but he's now sort of looking back, or just like really processing everything that's going on. And so it was also sort of trying to see where this whole world is going. And so it's a good idea. It's actually a nice idea, because it's also maybe a little more interesting to read. Because the book that we now have, it's non-fictional. It has one chapter which is also sort of the biography on Ricardo Salinas, because he comes from a family of gold bucks who really have gone through hyperinflation. So this is really interesting to read and really practical as well and tangible. But yeah, maybe a fictional book with a diary which has some sort of theoretical building blocks in it would be interesting.
I see people are all excited around here because there's like a lot of noise going on, but it doesn't matter. So my question to you is then, if people want to contact you, or if people want to find you, I mean, here now at BTC Prague in the conference, obviously they see you and they talk to you, they can buy a book and you sign it for them. But where can people normally contact you and find you on social media-wise, LinkedIn-wise, Twitter-wise, everything?
It's probably X is the easiest, where it's P-A-H-U-E-G. Prague is sort of, it's a combination of my last name, my first name. Then I'm on LinkedIn as well under my normal name. I'm on Noster. People can find me on Noster as well. I do regularly post on Noster because I really like the concept. And then even Instagram nowadays, I do have a profile, but yeah, if you really want to Google me, you probably will find if you...
And you also have a podcast, obviously.
Yes, I do have a podcast, exactly, which I do regular interviews with people,
Cool.
Exactly.
So I will link that all down below. And yeah, dear people, thank you. And Pascal, thank you.
Thanks, guys, for the interview. Great.
Nomad Podcast.